Hi, I'm Mary Ann Cappiello. I'm a professor of language and literacy at Lesley University, and I love nonfiction books for children and middle grade and young adults. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about The Rise and Fall of Charles Lindbergh by Fleming, which is released tomorrow, February 11th, 2020. There are so many parallels to the United States and the world 100 years ago and now. We face the reality of income inequality at levels that we have not seen since 100 years ago. We see the rise of nationalism in the United States and around the world. So what are some of the lessons that we can learn through the lens of the life of Charles Lindbergh that allow us to think about who we are in 2020 and who do we want to be? One of the things that I find really fascinating about the book is thinking about Charles Lindbergh and his status as a wealthy American for the majority of his life. And one of the ways that I think teachers and teenagers can investigate this new book, along with Candy's other books, such as her biographies of P.T. Barnum and the Lincolns and Amelia Earhart and the Romanov family, is through the lens of class. What are the ways in which class brings privilege, not just the tangible privilege of a big house or a nice car or financial security, but what are the ways in which class and money buys you privilege and access to power in a society? And so doing an author study of Candy's chapter-length biographies through the lens of class and privilege and power could be a really interesting exploration, particularly at this moment in time where we see such divisions between the majority of Americans and those most privileged at the top. Another fascinating lens, I think, in which we can look at the life of Charles Lindbergh in the classroom is really thinking about the ways in which we orchestrate our lives through social media. And not just the idea of reality TV, which remains so popular as a form of entertainment in this country, but also the ways in which we each curate ourselves. How are your teenagers curating their images via Snapchat, on Instagram? What are some of the ways in which reality is constructed by the images that we choose to present of ourselves and the ways in which we choose to present ourselves? So when you read The Rise and Fall of Charles Lindbergh, you'll see not only, of course, his rise to fame from his famous transatlantic flight from New York to Paris, and the ways in which his image was controlled by the media, to some extent the way he wanted to, and in other ways, obviously, the media controlled his image. But how does that connect with the ways in which reality TV now creates our reality as well as is something that we create? So what would it be like to read The Rise and Fall of Charles Lindbergh in a text set that also included perhaps the Hunger Games? And that rumination on the power of television and media to shape and create our reality. What are some of the ways in which in today's world we are creating the reality we want to see? So for example, before World War II, Charles Lindbergh and his wife Anne Morrow Lindbergh traveled to Berlin. Adolf Hitler is the leader, and they are quite impressed with the efficiency and the cleanliness of Germany, of Berlin as a city, the industrious nature of the people that they see, who seem to be living happy lives and they're well employed. And the reality is that the German government made sure that the streets were clean. They removed people, the homeless, from the street, the Roma Sinti from view. They took down all of the signs regarding Jewish people. So they sanitized their city so that there would be an image of Germany that the Lindberghs were able to experience and then talk about when they came back to America. To what extent is that still happening today? We're in a presidential campaign season. What are the ways in which our reality is being constructed through political ads, through the coverage of the media? How is that creating our understanding of who we are in our reality? So I think this is a rich opportunity to explore this in the past when much of the media was new, photography, radio, film, and really examine it with our new technologies today. Another wonderful opportunity this book presents young people with is the idea of the freedom of the press. The press has become a story in and of itself in our world today. And so is it fake news? Is it real news? To what extent does freedom of speech mean we need to allow the press to report on everything? We see in England, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle choosing to step away from that life because of the control that they felt the press had on their freedom and the ways in which their freedom was restricted by the press. So we have a contemporary story of that. We have a president who likes to critique news organizations and say that they're fake news, when in reality they're often reporting on the truth. At the same time, we see examples in The Rise and Fall of Charles Lindbergh of the ways in which the press truly infiltrated his life and pushed boundaries in ways literally and figuratively that were inappropriate, that were wrong, that destroyed his sense of privacy when he and his family were most vulnerable. So a really powerful exploration is possible about both the present and the past with this book. The whole concept of celebrities and politics and policy is a conversation that you can have around this book. We have a president who was a reality television star, who was a businessman, who then, found his political identity and ran for office. Charles Lindbergh did not run for office, but also went from being someone who was a celebrity for his expertise in flying, and then, because of his interest in science and because of his interest in technology, started to develop an interest in politics and suddenly found himself with a platform to share his beliefs, some of which were quite racist and controversial. And so what does that mean to have someone who comes from the world of either Hollywood or just the athletic community, and then becomes a political figure? What are the implications of that? So there's a wonderful comparison and contrast that can be done. Another really important conversation to have when talking about Charles Lindbergh is his belief in eugenics and his idea that of racial purity, and that somehow the quote-unquote white race was important to preserve, and that survival of the fittest meant that some groups of people should survive and some should not. It's a disgusting and loathsome belief, and one that in the United States of America, in a democracy, we would like to say that's done and that's over and that's not us. But there are ways that we can be looking at the role of identity and who you are and how you prove who you are in our world today that can be examined more closely, perhaps, through the distance of the past. We have travel bans from various countries that are being put in place. We have children at the border who are being put in cages by the thousands by our government. There are particular identities who are being people who are being put in cages and people who are not. And why is that so? And how can we connect that to the horrors of the Holocaust, to the horrors of eugenics, to the work that Charles Lindbergh supported and publicized? There are movements across the country right now to ban trans teenagers from participating in high school athletics. What is that about? What are we saying is who gets to say who someone is? Why would it be okay for a school district to investigate someone's physical body in order to allow that student to play a sport? Where on the continuum of identity is that? So there are so many important questions at this particular moment in time that we need to ask ourselves. And interestingly enough, this book about Charles Lindbergh can allow us to do some of that really difficult work. When I was a teenager in the mid-1980s, what happened to Lindbergh's baby was a very popular research topic whenever we had to do a research paper. What happened to Amelia Earhart? Is the Bermuda Triangle real? What happened to Lindbergh's baby? I never knew all these other things about Charles Lindbergh, and I never knew them to the depth that I do now because I read Candy's book. I love A Gift from the Sea. For years, I would give that as wedding presents. I never knew Anne Morrow Lindbergh's embrace of the Nazi Germany. So this was an eye-opening book for me on so many levels, and it made me recalibrate my understanding of who they were and their role in 20th century America. One thing that I do like to hold on to at the end of reading this book is the idea of Charles Lindbergh's flight as something that brought all Americans together, that American ingenuity and know-how and skill and expertise was celebrated from sea to sea, shining sea, when he made that transatlantic flight from New York to Paris for the first time. And it's an opportunity for us to ask, when are the other times in American history where we have all come together in celebration of something wonderful that we have done? And how have those moments differed over time? I remember sitting in my middle school gym watching the space shuttle land for the first time and having that sense of being proud to be an American, to be proud of this new and novel way in which we were traveling into space. So asking our students to investigate those moments in time that brought us together and made us proud is equally as essential as anything else that we could explore at this particular moment in American history. Take care, and thanks for listening.